met a homeless man on the street. He passed away in a warehouse fire that was deliberately lit.
I was raped.
Abused by two grossly offensive staff members, discrimination and vilification towards people with disabilities.
The record is falsified, evidence is removed.
It was a betrayal, it was an injustice of social equality, it was an injustice of gender equality, it was just injustice of everything.
Silva, and we're sharing stories today about injustice. I'm joined by my panel of wonderful people. We have Tom Cardy. Tom. We've got Lee. Hi Lee. And Zach. Thanks for joining us. Tom, can you share with us your story? Injustice is the unfair beast built of shadows. It happens when we don't watch and thrives when we look away. It is tragedy with an attainable retribution. For better against worse, we begin with Tom, who is an activist fighting for justice, standing for the silence and acting as an example to those too frightened to condemn the beast. Today, he speaks for one man who can no longer speak up in the hope that we all offer to do the same for others when the shade is cast on justice.
Sure. Well, I started up a music charity project called Busking for Beds. Through that program, I met a homeless man on the street who we were hoping to use as a success story for a documentary. When I went to purchase a phone for him so we could keep in contact, I went to try and visit him again, and the shop owners of the shop that he used to sit out the front of informed me that he'd passed away in a warehouse fire that was deliberately lit. So obviously that was pretty disturbing. I ended up playing and talking at his funeral, and that's when I heard about his backstory of child abuse. I guess the injustice that I want to talk about today is the fact that he felt he couldn't voice what had happened to him and his siblings, and that I guess in that way society had kind of cheated him.
Thank you for sharing that. How do you think justice could or should have been served in this person's case?
If had we as a society been able to create movements like there are today, like a Polished Man campaign, then I think, as a society, we would have been able to eradicate these sort of issues at their core. Unfortunately, when this would have happened to him, it was 20, 30 years ago, and these sort of movements, weren't in existence. Nowadays they are, but that was too late for him, so I don't think we have full faith in the powers that be. And so I think it needs to be something that comes from the masses in order to empower people who feel they don't have a voice, to speak up, as has been the case, a perfect example with the Me Too movement. And as we can see, people are speaking up, and obviously we're getting some positive results from that. So, the things such as the Polished Man campaign are great, and we just need more of that sort of thing. So I think that's where justice could have been served, but it's hindsight.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So would you say the main injustice of your experience is where, as a society, we've let individuals down?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're being silenced by the powerful few, but I think slowly that's changing. There's a bit of a movement happening. It's great. In his case, it was a little too late, but I do believe that we're being silenced, by people in power that, misogynistic, whatever, humans that shouldn't be in power, but because of their confidence, their, bravado, they end up in power. And I think, in time, slowly, that's going to change. I think we're seeing that.
Would you say, Tom, that it's these types of stories of injustice that has driven you to take action as an artist or as a professional?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think I have my own war that everyone's got their own war that they're fighting. And I think in my industries, the same thing exists. So, everyone is able to draw from somebody else's experience, like I do, where you can feel for that person, and you feel that you can. I mean, that's how busking for beds came about. I mean, I was busking on the street, and my next door neighbours were homeless people. I was able to make money, but they didn't have a voice. So I thought, well, why not help them out? I mean, I'm playing gigs 4 times a week. I'm by no means well off, but I'm making a living out of it, and I don't need all the money that I'm making on the street. I thought, well, why not create a movement there and encourage other musicians to do the same?
That's incredible and very inspiring. Thank you so much for coming forward today
Thank you.
and sharing your passion with us, because it's often these really tragic stories that spur us on, like our human spirit, to actually do something with what we have. And even though we do say that there are the powers that be, we are actually in such a wonderful country that can provide certain liberties for people who, like yourself, has the access and the ability to make money for yourself and give back. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So Lee, can you share with us why you're here today? There is a constant battle of good versus evil and justice versus injustice in this world. A world that can only improve by fighting for what's right. It comes from acting on behalf of others, in particular to speak out and act for those that can't. Speaking out even when you're not the object of oppression, when you witness an injustice, and even when whistleblowing may be frowned upon. To act as a voice for the falsely accused, the abused, and the innocent, to speak up against corrupt government systems, to expose organisations and individuals that should protect people over themselves, to hold government perpetrators accountable for their actions, for representatives to represent people instead of for self-interest, and for an all-inclusive community dedicated to a better world. Today, Lee, a whistleblower, marks a victory for justice by embarking on a movement for a better consciousness and a better world. Her story today advocates for truth and justice.
Thanks, Janelle, for this opportunity, by the way. I'm here just to briefly talk about a scenario that I'm sure is not unheard of. I'm sure there are potentially thousands of people suffering at the hands of the powers that be, that are being abused in some form or another. I can't speak in detail about my scenario because there's legal proceedings underway. However, what I'd like to share is that there are a lot of people, particularly those that are in a disadvantaged group, maybe they have a disability or for some reason or another are not able to speak up for themselves, who are being abused, and powers that be are very aware of what's going on and are doing nothing about it, to the point where there are records falsified, evidence is removed, people are outright lying about scenarios that would enable that person or people to obtain the help that they need. And these are, I'm not just talking about average people going through this scenario, I'm talking about publicly funded organisations from taxpayers' dollars that are perpetrators. Okay, they're highly aware of what they're doing. They're putting gag orders onto people so that they can't talk about these issues, making people too scared to talk about these issues, and thus that vicious cycle continues. So I'm here today to put a voice forward for some of those people, and I have people in my life that are suffering at the hands of those people as we speak, and I'm wanting to make others aware that you're not alone if this is happening to you, and I would hope that there'll be a movement created of some sort that will enable people to speak up or speak up on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves.
Would you say that is the main injustice of your story?
I suspect that there is many layers to what the injustices are. I feel they start at grassroots level where people are not, they're just turning away, they're ignoring it. That's at grassroots level. Then there's the next level where some people may be made aware of there being issues, but they're still choosing to ignore them, or they will, let's say, gloss over what's happening. They might do a basic report and that report might vanish, or it might have some false information in there to make it sound less important than what the issue is. Then we move up to the next level. If by any chance it is forced into the courts or to a government official or an organisation that is meant to be investigating these issues, often it's the case we can't help you unless you're wealthy enough to afford a lawyer, which most people in the general public cannot. Then I'm sorry, we can't help you. Why don't you go to ABCD and you do that, and then ABC tells you to go back to ABCD. That's a classic scenario of chasing your tail. We can't help you, bad luck. So it leaves, it leaves people defenceless. It leaves people wondering, what can I do? There's nothing I can do. And the frustration, the anxiety, the depression, the trauma, all of that causes can be diabolical. People have committed suicide over these issues. We've got an epidemic of people on drugs because they can't handle the mental trauma of what they're trying to deal with. And government officials are completely ignoring these issues, utterly and completely ignoring them. So I'm highly aware of it, and I would really like people to step up to the plate and say, enough. Maybe we should start an enough movement. What do you think?
So I can hear that, and also from what you've been able to share of your own story, how it runs deep into your own personal story. How do you feel justice can or should be served in this case that you're dealing with at the moment? How can...
Oh, Janelle, can I laugh out loud at that one? Really?
Well, yeah, let's...
First and foremost, the people who are responsible, particularly those who are being paid by public money to deal with these issues, should get off their backsides and deal with them. There are far too many lazy people in these systems. There are far too many too busy people in these organisations. They need to do their jobs, first and foremost. Secondly, there needs to be another way that these organisations and these people can be, let's say, overviewed. I might not have the correct term there, but that they can be made accountable, okay? Because there's far too many in the hierarchy that have nobody overseeing what they do. So complaints and issues, particularly of abuse, get to a certain point and it stops. There's no going past that. I can give you a perfect example. There's a government organisation, there's two actually that I know of, where if you lay a complaint about somebody being abused in a government-run institution or government-funded institution, their reporting system is internal and there is nobody you can complain to above that. Doesn't that seem ludicrous to you? You can go to a certain point and then it stops in that same organisation. How is there justice in that? There's not. Like, ideally, my dream, my legacy to leave behind would be that there be a royal commission made into these organisations and to fix the lackadaisical attitude that's going on, that's prevalent. And they know it. I've spoken to doctors, lawyers, many victims. On and on it goes. Everyone is talking about, I know it happens, I know it happens, I know it happens. Why is it happening for starters? Why can't we stop it? If there's anybody out there who can step forward and help with this, I feel it's our moral and ethical obligation to do so. Help those who can't help themselves. It's a really easy ask, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lee, for joining us. I look forward to hearing more. Zach.
Hello.
Hi. Can you share with us what has brought you here today? Identity is personal, buried deep in one's soul, a place society should not be able to reach or affect. It is the raw truth that affects every facet of your life. It is difficult enough as it is to fully know your identity in a world littered with personality diagnoses and social pressure, prejudice, bullying and sexist hatred. So recognising you are not the gender you were born into is still one of the most controversial subjects in society, politics and medicine today. Zach today speaks about the implications of gender reassignment, prejudice, bullying, inequality and injustice in the workplace and society as a whole as he recounts his father's brave choice to be herself.
My story revolves around my father, who 22 years ago underwent a sexual change to become a woman. I think during that time, it was quite a while ago for such a transition, and we've made a lot of progress in that realm so far, but back then she was an English teacher. Now, she hadn't come out yet. She'd gone through, she started the psychotherapy and I think she'd started the drug treatments at the time, but she hadn't come out. The process hadn't started very much. As it progressed and went on a bit, the principal of the school, it's a high school, saw the changes and fired her for the transgenderism. Now, she fought it heavily, and about a month or two after, she managed to get the job back, but they had changed the title and requirements of her job. So, went back, she was no longer a English teacher for secondary school. The title and requirements were then literacy studies from prep to year 12. And one of the issues was she was a fantastic secondary teacher of English, but she didn't have the qualifications to teach prep to 6. And so they were able to sack her again for not meeting this requirement. And they didn't fill this position with someone who was qualified. And when they did fire her for not being able to do the job that they made up, they hired someone else and they changed the job requirement back to being only secondary teaching. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Thanks, Zach, for giving us this window into your own family's experience. Can you share with me what you feel is the main injustice that your father was?
The blind prejudice and blatant disregard for the rules and the protections of work ethics. Pick something. It was so just on a ground basis. Like before this issue, this even became an issue, the principal and my father were close as well. I think that it was a betrayal, it was an injustice of social equality, it was an injustice of gender equality, it was just an injustice of everything. I know that we've made a lot of progress, but I know that it still goes on, and I can't talk about names and locations because it would still impact her job safety. So after it happened, she found a job at a far more alternative school. It didn't pay very well. She ended up not being able to stay here, and she's gone to live as an expat overseas. But she has to keep it secret because if they found out overseas, she'd lose her job again. So, it's still an injustice 22 years later on.
So, Zach, how can we, if I was to grant you this wish, how can we serve justice in this case?
Interestingly enough, actually, we passed the gay marriage law recently, which brings up one of the issues that came upon when my father was having the name changed and had to get a new passport. Now, with the passport was also mailed a statement saying you cannot use this passport to get married to anyone, because they didn't recognise the transgenderism, so she couldn't marry either gender. The fact that we have allowed, as a country, to the gay marriage finally, that's actually again the tip of the iceberg. There's plenty more to be done. The thing is when it happened, the law was on her side. The law said that they cannot withhold her name change for the passport, because they withheld that for over a year. And the law was on her side. They said, no, you can't. You must, provide this. I think that, so I guess in that term, not letting an individual's bias override bureaucracy, intricity. I think that would be a fantastic place to start.
I feel like we have just touched on an incredible amount of stories just in your three sharings, and I would like to just acknowledge how each person here today has really brought to the table very important things that require so much more discussion. Zach, thank you for coming forward.
No, my pleasure.
You're representing, and may we talk more and may change come. I understand
I
that.
hope one day that it would be okay to talk about it freely.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for joining us. This is the beginning of many, many, many discussions, and as said before, we welcome forward anyone to come forward with stories of injustice. And if you do have access, or you are a part of the powers that be, and you're a part of, in particular, the legal or the medical industry, to come forward. And if you're willing to support pro bono the people who have shared with us stories today, we are more than happy and welcoming you in coming forward. Thank you so much, Tom and Lee and Zach. I look forward to more discussions with you about all of the grassroots change that you're doing in your lives. Thank you, and for our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.